Good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick Milliken from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and it is really exciting virtual program today with Dana Stabenow. It's funny, we're Barbara, Dana, and myself. We're in three separate locations. I'm kind of recording this from home, and Barbara is finally in her home office, her real home office,
Right.
and Dana is in another room in Barbara's house. So she'll be talking about her brand new book. Dana will be the Spoils of the Dead, or Spoils of the Dead. And for those of you watching on Facebook, I'm going to be monitoring the Facebook feed for any questions you might have for Dana. And otherwise, I'll be largely invisible. You'll be happy to know. And I'm going to turn it over to Barbara Peters.
Thank you, Patrick. It's really a pleasure to be doing this. Dana and I are both at the mercy of both my husband and our dog. So if at any moment everything erupts, that's the way it is. But I'm in my office and Dana's in the library. And last year, for those of you who recall it, who were here, we were in the bookstore and it was wall-to-wall fans and it was really exciting and we ran out of books. And, we can't replicate that right now in the time of COVID, but aren't we lucky that we can do this through Zoom technology and reach many of you who might never have come to Scottsdale. And then maybe next year we can resume it and more of you will be even more enthused about coming to Scottsdale. So, Dana, how are you?
I'm fine and I'm surrounded by books. I couldn't be happier.
Absolutely true. Now, I'm going to start this off by Dana's going to shoot me, but she had a wonderful review in the London Times, the Sunday Times, as Dana will say, the land of Shakespeare has reviewed my book. But what I love is it starts out with the reviewer saying, every time I see this name, I call her Stab Me Now, which I think is hilarious. So I may never call you anything but Stab Me Now again. And it's perfect for a crime writer. But honestly, Dana, wasn't it a thrill to see your book reviewed in the Sunday Times?
Did you remember that writer who was living in your house, erupting through the door of your office to announce the news? Yeah, it's dizzying. It is just, to say that I was giddy is to understate the case. I was thrilled to be mentioned in the Times of London. It's the first place I went when I traveled overseas.
Is it? From Alaska? Yeah. I thought you went to Hawaii. You don't count that as traveling overseas?
It's a state. Hawaii's a state.
Yeah, I know, but it's a long flight.
But, the UK is across the other pond.
Got it. Absolutely true. Well, and what's really fun is that Dana's publisher, Head of Zeus, is actually headquartered in London. And many of you may remember from last year that her books arrive in the United States by boat. They don't swim over here, but Grace, wonderfully, he also has republished the first 4 Liam Campbell books because it's been, what's it been, Dana, 15 years since the last?
I think 16. Last time out, yeah, I think it's 16 since, and I don't know how long they've been out of print, over a decade, certainly.
It's been a long time. So for those of you who may have read the stories and forgotten them or have never read them, you now have an opportunity to read them before you read Spoils of the Dead, or since it's a complete novel in itself and a wonderful new beginning for Liam and his wife, Wynette, you could read and go back and read the first 4. But anyhow, I think it's enterprising that we can get all of them. So what I wanted to start out talking about is landscape, because the other thing that's fun about the Sunday Times is that Alaska has clearly become a venue of fascination around the world. And yet I can remember when Dana started that there was a tendency to think that Alaska was very regional, it was somewhere up north. It was a long way from New York anyway. And it didn't seem to exert the same fascination on publishers anyway that it currently does. So I thought that the Sunday Times review was a landmark in that respect, Dana, that Alaska was just as interesting as New York.
When I tried to sell my first book to agents in New York, one of them wrote back and said, "Your book sounds great. I'd love to represent you. Unfortunately, I only represent American authors." So yes, I do feel that I have come a very long way. And, we have current events to thank for that in some respect.
Well, we do. And we also have, the greatest catch. I mean, there's been and cruising and all kinds of things over the time that you've been writing, the Kate Shugaks, the Liam Campbells. Alaska has come much more into the, forefront of
Oh,
people's.
let us not forget all the reality television programs set in Alaska as well. There's not one but two gold digging programs, I think, set in Nome. There's a reality program that's set in my hometown. There's, don't ask me the name of it, The Deadliest Catch Boat. I can walk down to the harbor and see it anytime I want. So yeah, that I'm sure is also bringing a lot of attention Alaska's way. And of course, let's not forget Sarah Palin either.
I was going to skip over that. I don't want, political discourse is not our thing here, but I brought it up in part because you have changed the landscape in Liam and Y's life. And one of the great things about this new book, Spoils of the Dead, and don't forget, we have autographed copies, lots of autographed copies for sale at the Poison Pet.
Just, straight right here.
There it is. Is that they have changed locations. Liam is taking up a new post. And one of the lovely, originally one, but now two passages anyway in the book, involves Y flying, because she's a pilot, flying down from where they used to live down, or is it up? Sorry.
Up and east.
Okay. Anyway, she's flying, and she's looking down, and there's lots of beautiful descriptions that Dana has written about what Y is seeing as she makes her journey. So, Dana, is this a flight that you yourself have taken?
Yes, not in one bite. I've been through Lake Clark Pass and down to, oh geez, where did we go? Anyway, down to Bristol Bay, and then I've been back up, and then I've been over to that side of the inlet and stayed at a lodge on the beach there, and then flown back up and over Callaghan Island, and then down the coast and around to Homer. So yeah, in increments, I have made this entire trip. And this comes from two places. Number one, setting. I always say this, when aspiring authors ask me, okay, where do you begin? How do you start? I always start with setting. That's not why everybody should do it. It's just the way I do it. And once you have the setting firmly in mind, then you can figure out who lives there and what they're getting up to. And the other reason is that I revisited the Liam Campbell characters in the 19th Kate Shugak novel. And it is customary for Alaska State Troopers to move from post to post. And really, they don't end up in places like Newenham until toward the end of their career, because you get paid higher for bush postings. And that is what your retirement is based on. So a lot of them angle for posts in the bush. And I thought to myself, first of all, it's just not normal for Liam at his age to be in Newenham. And secondly, it isn't normal for him not to have moved around more in his postings. There were reasons for that, good, narrative reasons for that, but it was time definitely for him to move to a new post. So I did. That's what I did.
Homer is a major tourist attraction in Alaska. In fact, if I remember your stories, while Alaskans were not doing a lot of traveling, they could at least come to Homer by car. So you had an unusually high number of visitors over the course of the last year, right?
Oh God, yes. I mean, everybody from Fairbanks and Anchorage, everybody on the road system, let's put it that way. They wanted to go on vacation and they couldn't get on a plane because of COVID. So they got in their cars and they drove to Homer. There were times when I'd go out to pull on the Sterling Highway to go into town to buy groceries or check the mail. And it was like I'd be stuck there for 5 minutes before I could make a right turn, just because of the traffic coming up the hill. It was extraordinary. I didn't expect to see anyone. I thought, everybody's staying home because of COVID, but no, they all came to Homer.
Well, it wasn't just for the halibut, right? Although, I've been to visit you in Homer, and the setting is beautiful. And one of the great treats is to sail across the bay. There's an astonishing restaurant across the bay.
Yes.
Oh, Lord. Right. And it's absolutely gorgeous and it's fun. We went down the pier in order to catch the ferry that was going to take us over that. And those adorable otters, they were in the water. There was one who was he an attention hound or was he an attention hound? There he was floating on his back and just looking adorable. And
I think he gets payoffs from the Homer Chamber of Commerce, really.
So is it actually Homer, or have you created a fictional Homer in Spoils of the Dead?
I'm other than Anchorage, which is big enough to take anything I throw at it. When I am writing in towns in Alaska, they're all so small that really you can't write about them without people saying, that's me. So I make them up. I mean, yes, it is very loosely based on Homer, but I have renamed everything, and none of the people are in my book are live, actually live, except for historical figures I might refer to in passing.
Sure. Well, Liam arrives, and it's a new post, and he's got new housing, and he wants it to be great for why. Obviously, it could just be a peaceful transition, but this is a crime novel, right? So not going to be a peaceful transition. Why don't we just talk a little bit about how the story, we don't want to do any spoilers, Dana, but why don't we go to the point where you feel like we can get people into the plot, but not go too far?
Well, Liam arrives in Bluestown first, and he's waiting for, and Y is back packing everything up and, getting ready to fly over. And she's arriving that day, but not until later. So he wakes up, and what is he going to do? He's going to take the paperwork down to the guy he bought the house from. And then he meets some of the major players in what's going on in Chugacka Bay. And one of them in particular is an archaeologist and says, why don't you come out and look at my dig? And Liam looks at his watch and decides Y is still a couple hours out. So why doesn't he follow Eric up to his dig? And Eric, shows him around, and it seems to Liam like, it's pretty small potatoes as far as an archaeological dig. He probably is thinking, Louis B. Leakey in the, greater African Rift Valley. But no, this is something on a much smaller scale. And I have to say that the find was inspired by an actual find that was made on the Kenai Peninsula. And it was, I'm in Scottsdale, so I'm not at home, and I can't just reach over and pull the book down off the shelf. But it was written up in 2 different books that I found in the Homer bookstore that basically inspired the entire plot of this book.
Wonderful. Well, one of the things that I do love, and you did it in one particular Kate Shugak more than a lot of them, the one where we went back to the influenza epidemic of 1918.
Singing of the Dead. Yeah.
What is it again?
The Singing of the Dead.
Singing of the Dead. I'm sorry, titles just don't stick in my head anymore. But I love it when you bring in real Alaska history. And I think one of the great things about Spoils of the Dead, in addition to the fabulous landscape, and we'll get to the relationships, we're going there, is the history that you bring in. There's some really nifty stuff, and an archaeological dig is a great way to introduce that, because, after all, you're spading up the past, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Alaska is kind of, probably anyone will say this about their home, but Alaska is kind of an astonishing place. For 5 years, I wrote the Alaska Traveler column for Alaska Magazine, where they basically paid me to fly around the state and write about it. Any writer's dream job. It was so I got to go a lot of places. It's not cheap to fly around Alaska. So I got to go to a lot of places that I had never seen before. And you stumble across the most astonishing history. Like I drove the Alcan Highway with a friend who had bought a car outside, and her husband didn't want to make the trip again. So she said, fly out to Montana, drive back with me. And I thought, I can get 2 columns for Alaska Magazine out of that, driving the Alcan. It had to be, the experiences that I wrote about had to be things that people could repeat themselves, that they could do themselves. Otherwise, my editor would go, doink, no, you can't write about that. So while we were on the Alcan, we stayed overnight in Dawson, and then we took the ferry over, and we came over the top of the World Highway, and then there was a right turn to Eagle. And I looked at Sharon, who was my friend, and I said, well, let's go to Eagle. So we hung a right and we went to Eagle, and it's this tiny little town on the Yukon that is just jammed with Alaskan history. What was his name? Was it Billy Mitchell who ran the telegraph wire up there? And Eagle was a place where what was his name? Roald Amundsen staggered on shore, not on shore but managed where the first news of Roald Amundsen's surviving Arctic expedition was then transferred to the rest of the world. And everywhere you look in Alaska, there are places like that, really extraordinary, unexpected instances of history. It's astonishing. I mean, I can't wait till I find out. I was raised on Kachemak Bay, across the bay in Seldovia, and I live across the bay from Seldovia in Homer now. And I have a feeling that I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the history of my home bay, if you want to put it that way. I expect to find many, many more things as I continue this series there.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to explore them with you. One of the things that, I had a good time. I'm lucky enough to be Dana's first editor anyway on her books now. And there's a historical bit and a character that comes in. And Dana's always said, that every character deserves a backstory, even if it's just a couple of lines. But my feeling was that this character needed a lot more than just a couple of lines. He needed a much deeper story. And I loved it when you came back and, filled in. I don't want to say who it is because it'll be a spoiler, but you filled in quite a lot about this guy's life. And it was wonderful. He just sort of sprang up in front of me. And I thought, said a lot about why are people attracted to wilder places? What is it that they go to wilder places for?
It's not just the wild places, it's the opportunists that go to the places that are just barely coming together to basically get whatever they can out of it and, haul south. And that's what this guy was doing. And that still happens in Alaska. I mean, it's partly because they're on our roads and we have, very few roads, and we have to fly everywhere or take a boat everywhere where the, water isn't frozen sometimes of the year. And I mean, there's constantly always people coming to Alaska to make their bones, to, make their bank, to, put in their 20 and take their retirement to Sun City, Arizona. And some of those people are not what I would call, very honest or very good people, and they're out for what they can get. And of course, because it's so hard for small Alaskan villages to import really good people, then you will have these people who are willing to take advantage. Just let me not dance around. There's a story that I know of in a town that I know of where, we don't even have to do that. We can talk about my own personal experience. When I was 5 years old and we were still living in Cordova, a dentist came to town. I had really bad teeth, and the dentist was not a dentist. And I got this dentist, and I was like 5 years old and took 5 people to hold me down because he was so bad and hurt me so bad. And I didn't go to a dentist again until I was 14. We had a guy who was not a doctor come and represent himself in my hometown when I was a kid. This kind of thing, it's not as bad as it was before because of the internet, good old Mr. Google, but it still happens.
Yes. You already touched on it when you mentioned Dawson. I mean, we think about the gold rush. I mean, I've been lucky enough to not just visit you, but sail all around Alaska on the way to the Northwest Passage. And, you go past where the end of the Iditarod is and, see people who went up there trying to make a life, whether they're ripping income out of the sea or digging it up out of the ground, or, you've often said that Alaska is like, the great extraction state.
It is. That's what it is, a resource extraction state. We pull stuff out of the ground and we pull stuff out of the water. We've never done anything else. I think mostly because we haven't learned to do anything else because we haven't had to learn, but I think that's about to change.
Well, in Arizona, it's all about developers, if we
say that about many Western states. Yeah.
I know, it's really true. But in any case, it's a wonderful part of the backstory in this book, and I really enjoyed it. And it was fun to watch this particular character and incident come to life under Dana's hand in a much bigger way.
He's out for what he can get, and he was out for what he could get all across the United States, from New York all the way to Alaska.
Absolutely true. So anyway, we have Liam, and he goes to the dig, and then stuff happens. But Y flies in, and part of the point of the book here is to explore their relationship, which you've nurtured along over the course of the 5 books, and also Restless in the Grave. I mean, because Liam is a character in that. How do you feel about a long-term relationship? There are so many different schools of thought about whether protagonists in novels, in a continuing series, whether they can have a successful long-term relationship, or whether it's more exciting if they fling partners, to the ground at the exit of every book and then start all over again. Travis McGee would be a great example of that. A new girl.
Travis McGee. Okay, I yielded none of my admiration of John D. MacDonald, and I love the Travis McGee novels, but Travis McGee was the most scaredy cat guy in regards to relationships I ever met in my entire life between the covers of a book. Okay, just geez, you just want to say, Trav, get a grip, dude. Seriously, there's some really good. I have very obviously have strong feelings about this. It really bothers me when I'm reading I read a lot of series. One of the reasons I write series is because I love reading series. I love going back and revisiting characters. And one thing I loathe in miniseries is that it seems to me authors deliberately spoke in the wheel of a relationship that it isn't necessary. And it's definitely not necessary for conflict, because how difficult is it to maintain a relationship going forward in real life and in fiction? I am not going to, I'll just say it, Liam and Y are going to make their relationship work, and it won't always be easy. And there always will be trouble, because there is in every relationship, but they're going to work it out because they're smart and they're strong and they love each other. And there's not going to be any frivolous breaking up with their relationship. That's just not going to happen. They have found each other again, and they are, I think, just as determined to make it work as I am.
Oh, well, that's really wonderful news. And of course, there are new challenges in a new place. That's always part of it. But I really, I don't like the artificiality of breakups that I read in so many series, where people dump each other for particularly great reason. I mean, sometimes there's genuine tragedy. I mean, you yourself have written one like that when Jack dies in the Kate Shugak novels. And, that's not a frivolous breakup. That's a tragic.
I would like to point out again, for like the billionth time, that Jack dies saving Kate's life.
That's right.
There is no, and he would count the cost. He would count the cost well spent. He himself would say it was completely in character for him to make that sacrifice. And I bawled like a baby when that happened, because I hadn't known until I wrote that scene that it was going to happen. But I'm, no apologies there. I know I get a lot there. I don't think that we have ever had a single event at the Poison Pen where somebody didn't put their hand up and be mad at me for Jack's death. But I have no apologies. It was absolutely the right series.
Yeah, and it's also gives you with that, then Kate and Jim would not be some kind of a life together, despite all the difficulties that they encounter. So in a way, you're doing the same thing. But Y and Liam are now actually married, and they're presenting as a couple in this new place that they are, and they're going to have to work through things. Bit about why. I mean, because she has an interesting life of her own. She's not just coming down to be part of the state trooper thing. She's going to have.
I'm sorry, there was a little glitch there. Did you have a question, Barbara?
Yes. Is not as stable as I would like, even here in our own house. I was asking about what to be doing. She is going to be forging a life and a business of her own.
Yeah, and the next book is going to be more from her point of view than this book. This was Liam's book. The next book is going to be more, as I said, from her point of view. And it's going to be about finding her feet in this community and what exactly it is she wants to do with this new life that they are building. Because as you say, it's not going to ever be enough for Y just to, she has to work, and she loves to fly. And she built a very good business in Newenham that she's sold and has left behind. And she's going to figure out what she's going to do with the rest of her life. I can tell you it's going to involve flying for sure. And I think maybe there might be a hint of what she will be doing in the fact that Liam keeps hiring her to drag bodies to Anchorage in this book.
Well, that's very true. I mean, there can be support for his work in the sense of moving bodies or other things around. But Alaska depends. So much transportation in Alaska depends on flying. I mean, there's not a wealth of roads. There are conditions that make it tough. Your dad did a lot of flying, so it's not something you're unfamiliar with.
No.
But it's hard to imagine that she can't create some sort of business that allows her love of flying to have a practical result. And, not just, I mean, I know I've always been sorry that one time, you suggested that Rob and I sign up to fly up to watch the bears. I don't remember where in relation to Homer the bears were.
It was going to be Geographic Harbor. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't, and I'm sorry that we didn't, especially now in COVID. I'm sorry for every trip or every opportunity that I had that somehow at the time seemed easier to say, oh, we'll do it next time. But anyhow, definitely that flying is such a big part of Alaskan life, and that'll be great. And they're a childless couple.
Yes, they are a child. Well, except for Liam had a son who died, and that was before. That was his past history in the very first Liam Campbell novel, Fire and Ice, and then Y has adopted a boy that she rescued from a village she used to fly into out of Newenham.
Right, but I mean, so parenting also can really change the complexion of a marriage, and if you have people getting into perilous positions or running around investigating and all, combining that with parenting duties can often be a real challenge. And so, those are all things you'll get to work out as you move along. But now we've talked about Y and Liam. Let's talk a little bit about old people, because I remember Ema so well in the Kate Shugak novels. I might have minded more when Ema died than almost anybody. She was like a repository of so much, and losing her was really terrible.
Yeah.
So elders are so much. What role do elders play in Spoils of the Dead?
Well, there are two particular elders that I'm thinking of. There's Sibylla and there's Blue Jay, but Sibylla is the one that I think of most. She's good. I don't understand why I keep writing these older people that, logically if you write for any length of time in this world, you're going to lose them. I mean, I did that. This was the first thing I did in the first Kate Shugak novel, and I still smack my head over that. But this time, Sibylla is a little bit scatty, or she can be, and Liam encounters her in strange circumstances. Let's just leave it at that, and takes her back up to her assisted living place. And but because he is a kind man, he visits her again, and Y meets her as well, and she is a repository of the history of the Bay, and he disregards that at first. He doesn't realize that she has a significant key to the mystery that he is trying to unravel, and he's ashamed of it afterwards. Maybe it's a facet of me being 68 now, and me getting to the point where people are going to start ignoring me too. But I think we don't listen to our elders at our peril. And if there's one thing I would like to do, is to continue the introduction of older people, of elders into my narratives. And if they aren't listened to at first, they will be listened to at last.
Well, if you're going to be doing a lot of focus on the history around Kachemak Bay, and if you're going to, sorry,
Chungaskak is the name of this bay, Barbara.
sorry. Oh, well, listen, I was going to mention too, I am actually wearing my Alaskan walrus necklace that I bought at Portage Glacier. And speaking of history, both current and being erased, the first time I went to Portage Glacier, there's the Sirius Glacier. The last time I went to Portage Glacier, it had retreated so far that it was almost unrecognizable as the first place I had visited. So I think it's wonderful to capture so much of what we can, because the world is changing so fast. And things, I mean, Glacier Bay, the first time I ever sailed through it was really awesome. And the last time I sailed through it, the glaciers had so far retreated that it felt completely different. So, anything that you can capture about Alaskan life or landscape as it was through the elders, as compared to where it is now, is wonderful.
Yeah. I remember when I graduated from high school in Seldovia in 1969, we left the next day and my grandparents had flown up for that. And then we took Dad's boat across the bay to Homer, and then we drove to Anchorage, and we stopped in to Portage along the way. And right then, at that time, the ice was right up against the edge of the lake. Now, if you go to Portage, you have to get on a boat and go around the corner before you see any ice. Or you can just, go to the visitor center and watch the movie. But it is extraordinary. The retreat of the glaciers. It used to be much easier to see. There's 5 glaciers on the other side of Kachemak Bay. And when I was a kid, it was very obvious to look at all 5, spot all 5 glaciers. It's not that easy now because the ice has retreated so much.
Very true. Now, you live in, if I'm remembering right, are there 4 volcanoes that sort of ring around where you are?
Yeah, that's really 5. There's, Douglas, which is and actually the mountain that you see is Douglas, but the volcano is on the other side of it, and it's called Four Peaks, which is the island volcano. Then there's Iliamna, then there's Redoubt. And if you go all the way to the end of the Story Knife property on a really clear day and you peer through the trees, you might also be able to see Spur, which actually exploded the year I was born. And it erupted. And so it's kind of hard to spot now because it just looks like a bunch of little jagged, smaller peaks. It's not really a cone.
So I suppose, you could always have a volcano erupt for real excitement somewhere in one of the stories.
That wouldn't be a hard thing to do, because Redoubt has erupted twice since I moved down, since in the last 16 years. And I think the very first winter I was back down in the bay, Augustine went off. So,
right.
And dumped it in my house every time.
Right. So, there's a lot of exterior excitement that you can introduce into the writing in addition to whatever mysteries they are. Why is it, Dana, that you are attracted to crime fiction when you could be writing, adventure, travel, or romance? And actually, you have written science fiction. And currently, here in my very house, you're working on historical mystery, which I'm really looking forward to reading. And we can get to that in a minute. But what is it that draws you to writing mystery?
Well, really, I'm just using the mysteries to write about the settings. That's really what I'm doing. Maybe I shouldn't say this. Maybe you're going to kill me as soon as we sign off. But the mystery is the least interesting part of the entire thing to me. What's interesting to me is the setting and how I can use the plot to explore that setting and the people who live in that setting. It's much more exciting and interesting to me. Writing, I'm currently finishing up Disappearance of a Scribe, which is the second Eye of Isis novel. And I'm writing about construction, and writing about construction 2,000 years ago is a lot different than writing about construction today. And it's a way into that society, into that history, into that setting, into that place and time. I'm just using it to write what I think that time looked like and how those people acted.
Well, you certainly got hooked in Egypt reading Cleopatra, if I recall. but you know, who isn't? Dana and I took a research trip to Egypt a year ago in December. Thank goodness we went then and didn't postpone it. And when we get together to do an event for the second Eye of Isis book, we have a wealth of photographs. So I'm thinking that we'll create, you know, a wonderful slideshow. Fortunately, we don't have many pictures of the two of us climbing down into the tomb, which we did, leaving our guide and so forth behind. I'm wondering what these two elderly females were going to do, whether we were successfully going to go into the tomb, and even bigger question, will we successfully climb out of the tomb?
I still can't believe we did that. I mean, why on earth? What were we thinking? We climbed into a pile of rocks that's been sitting there for probably 3,000 years in earthquake territory. What could go wrong?
Yes. And actually, though, the funny part is for me, as you know, because I'm wobbly on my knee replacement leg, when we came out, because you're way up high in the pyramid, it's a long way to the ground. You have to climb way up to on the pyramid before you can climb way down inside the pyramid. And the elderly guide, who was really a lovely old man who didn't really have any English, but he saw that I was regarding the descent with real trepidation. It's not like they had stairs with handrails or anything. And so he very kindly stepped in front of me and became a moving guardrail so that I could put my hand on his shoulder. And you know, and go down. Because really, it's more a matter of confidence than it is actual physical disability. But you know, if your knee has ever betrayed you, you are not fully confident that you can step on it in a perilous and precipitous descent. So,
I do have a couple of pictures of you from behind as we were climbing back up out of the pyramid.
Oh, I'm so glad they're from behind, right? Definitely my best angle. But in any case, yeah, Dana and I were both enthralled with the landscape and history of Egypt. I had been there before. And, you know, I could easily, I mean, it's a clear parallel about why you write about Alaska. I mean, the same things that interest you, and also in your Silken Song trilogy, which involves vast geographical distance. And you actually went to China and then moved west along some of the Silk Road in order to really feel
all the way to Kashgar.
Yeah, how that would have been.
What am I saying? Egypt, India. What's the P country north and west of India? Pakistan. Geez, Pakistan was the next stop after Kashgar. In fact, I wanted to keep going in the worst way, but no.
Well, I mean, it's wonderful that you've been able to combine travel with your career as an author. I mean, you know, not everybody gets to do that. And it's great that you can draw upon that in a time right now where we're all living in some weird dystopian novel, but where travel is not available to us. And I'm grateful, as I say, for every trip I've taken and the memories I have of it. And yeah, and you are too. Last thing I wanted to talk about before we open it up to questions, you and I have had some discussions about trends in fiction, and that there's a kind of dark trend that seems to be intruding into crime fiction, in particular into the psychological drama. So dark twist, there's a sort of bad seed subgenre that has come along, but also just one where everyone is in a not particularly, well, let me rephrase that. Everybody comes from a dark place. Really like. Your thoughts about that? You obviously don't want to write that kind of fiction.
I really don't. I've got to have a hero. There's got to be someone, one person, maybe it isn't even the protagonist, that I have to like before I can either write a book or read it. And I have read way too many books lately where I don't like anyone at all in the books. And I don't know what those books are for. What am I supposed to take away from those books? There can be, if you don't like any of the people, there can be no triumph, I don't think, in that person's personal life or in the plot. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but you say, Barbara, I have read a great, I don't really understand why the book, let alone published, and I don't enjoy reading them, and I'm never going to write them. And I don't have any explanation for you. There is fashion and there's fashion in writing and in publishing as there is in everything else in the world. And right now that does this dystopian trust no one genre, if you can call it that, seems to be prevalent. God, I hope it's not in the ascendant, but.
Well, I think you're right that there definitely are trends, and you have one successful book and many follow. I also think that this has been a dark time, and that's a reflection. I have talked to many authors about whether they are going to write about the pandemic or how the pandemic has affected their writing, and whether they want to introduce it into their stories with myriad answers. I mean, Karen Slaughter and I talked on Friday, and she has one way of looking at it. Michael Connolly, in his most recent book, it comes to a conclusion just about a year ago. So the pandemic is brushing along the edge of the narrative at the end. There are so many decisions are personal that people have to make. When you wrote your book about the 1918 pandemic, in some ways it was a forecast or whatever, as well as historical. Who knew that we'd ever be living through it again? We have a tendency to think that once these things are over, they're never going to happen again. But the truth is, history of the world is full of pandemics, and maybe not on such a global scale as at the moment, although the influenza epidemic in 1918 certainly pandemic. And the Black Plague was certainly wiped out Europe. I don't honestly know whether it was.
I think it began in China. I'm pretty sure I think, I'm not sure, but spread around the entire world. I think something like a third of the world's population was gone. The entire world's population was gone after the Black Plague. And they said, I have seen estimates that the 1919-1920, the influenza epidemic actually killed 50 million people around the world. I have actually seen that estimate. They didn't have the records available to them that we do, but it was way worse, I think, even than we think at the time, now.
Well, we don't obviously have really good records, but the truth is, as soon as people could travel, whether they got onto boats or today airplanes, whatever it is, then these kinds of diseases can move.
I mean, define a plague. What about when the sailors from the whalers took the measles ashore in Hawaii? I mean, something that the Native Hawaiians had no resistance to, and that just wiped them out. So that disease is not anything new to the human race, and I don't think ever will be. And God, I mean, just look at COVID, that it's mutating rapidly. I think your original question was how I'm going to handle the current plague in my books. There is a great temptation, Barbara, to just leave it in the rearview mirror, and I may end up doing that, and I may not. I don't know. I can't really say at this point. I can tell you that right now I am sick of it. I am sick of living through it. And I am a person who has absolutely no reason to complain. My house is paid for. I make enough money to buy food, and I have no reason to complain. And so many millions of people do. And I'm sick of it too. So.
Well, I think the difficulty that most people are encountering at the moment in terms of whether to write about it or incorporate is we don't know how it's going to come out. We know what happened in these earlier plagues, and so you can write about them and there was a conclusion. Mm-hmm. But right at the moment, there's so many uncertainties. What we do know, or what we should expect, I think, is that the world will be different. I mean, the Black Plague really changed the social structure in Europe. It was the death knell of the feudal system. It allowed the rise of crafts and the middle class. There were so many fewer people. I remember there's a wonderful series set in Cambridge. I'm going blank on the author's name at the moment, but anyway, in 1350 or 1350s Cambridge. And Cambridge and Oxford University were actually engaged in warfare over students, because they didn't have enough to support the faculties on either one. And so with a very small student body, it was interesting how the universities competed desperately to try to get students to enroll in one or the other in order for the institution, as they were then, to survive. And we just don't know what the shape of the world is going to be like
It's not going to be the same.
No.
It is
So
not going to be the same. I'm not smart enough or informed enough to tell you what it's going to be like, but it's not going to be the same.
no, it won't. But one thing we have that we've developed is this technique we're using today, Zoom, which allows us to visit authors in places that we would normally not have gotten to before. We've gotten used to communicating this way. I talked to an author from Berlin yesterday. We've ranged all over from Reykjavik to Sweden to Melbourne, Australia to New Zealand. It's been like a world tour, even though it's virtual. We've done things that we were not able to do. So on that note, let me ask Patrick to come back and join us and see if we have questions from people who've been watching. Are you there, Patrick, in your black hole? Oh, you're emerging. I love it.
I have a trespasser who's
Oh.
going to join me. He's a black cat named Murray.
Don't let Murray anywhere near the keyboard.
All right. Yes, I have quite a few questions for you. Let's see. A bunch of people are tuning in, and let's see, where do we begin here? Lots of comments. Your descriptions of the settings are wonderful, but what I love the most is the way you share the histories and cultures of the Alaskan people, past and present. It's a nice comment. Somebody's saying hi to Murray.
Of course.
Let's see here. This is a good one. Sandy asks, is it difficult to take up a series again after such a period of time? Is there rust to shake off? Do you have to reread them and get familiar with them again? I'm paraphrasing your question. But.
Fortunately, well, I mean, to write, what I refer to as Liam 4.5 is really the 19th Kate Shugak novel. And I had to, because Liam shows up in the park and he asks Jim for help, and Jim can't give it to him. So he says, hey, let me introduce you to Kate. So Kate goes down to Newenham to help Liam work this case that he is personally involved in, so he can't investigate it. So I thought, well, we're going back to Newenham. And it had been what, I don't know, 12, 14 years since I'd written those books. And I basically knew the names of the characters, and that was about it. And so I had to go back and at least skim, if not read every single word of the books to get back in with the characters. And since that was just 2 Kate Shugak novels ago, I was more into the lives of the Liam characters than I would have been otherwise. But I did have to go back and skim all the books just to make sure I didn't stick my foot in it too badly with, making assertions about their lives that were not supported from the previous 4 books. I mean, you have to have continuity. Just because you're changing settings doesn't mean, that the characters' lives cannot follow after them.
I've had a couple of comments or questions about the audiobook version of Spoils of the Dead. And
it publishes on March 9th.
March 9th. I put something on our website, I put a link into the comments directing people to our site, and a shameless commercial plug.
Sorry.
Autographed books, but also, folks, if you look on our site, there's a really great new platform called Libro FM, which allows you to buy audiobooks and support independent bookstores at the same time. So you can do that on our website. If you just go below the picture of Dana's book, there's a blue bar that says buy the audiobook, and it'll take you right there.
Oh,
sorry.
March 9th.
March 9th.
Patrick,
Sally.
send me that link. You should send me that link and I'll include it in the next newsletter.
Great. Yeah. Let's see. Here's another comment, really. Sally asks, or she says, Dana's descriptions of Alaska prompted 2 trips there, one for 6 weeks and the last one for months, which I'm assuming might be 3 months. I have really loved seeing the places she uses as settings for myself, not only the books, but the Alaska Traveler columns. Are you still doing those, or is that?
No, I did it for 5 years and then I handed it off.
Yeah. Okay, Amanda asks the question everybody wants to know, I think, which is, I know we're here about Liam, and it's only been a year, but is there another Kate in the works?
I'm writing the second and third I Have Isis novels. I'm just finishing up the second. I'm going to turn right around and go back into the third, which is called Theft of an Idol, which doesn't mean what you think it means. And after that, probably there will be another Kate novel. I'm in between. I'm just about to finish up I Have Isis 2. And before I go into Isis 3, I did have a really good idea walking with Barbara 2 mornings ago. I had a really good idea for a short story, a Kate short story. So I'm going to be writing that next month.
Let's see here. Marla has had a couple of good questions. Have you ever considered doing a prequel with Kate and Jack before she moved to the park?
I've thought about it, but I haven't really come up with a really good idea yet. I mean, I even thought about setting a book or even more than one in Anchorage when they worked together in Anchorage for the DA. I thought about that, but just nothing is really, I have to have a plot. I have to have an idea for a plot before I can actually write the book. And I haven't had that idea yet. If I ever do, Marla, I promise I'll write it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it came up talking to Karen Slaughter yesterday because her most recent book, in fact, that is what happened. She goes back to Sarah's life with Jeffrey in the middle of a Will Trent novel because a cold case has brought them to that. And Charles Finch has done an interesting thing. He wrote a prequel to his wonderful Victorian series. And that was so interesting that he ended up writing a prequel trilogy. 3. And now in February, the end of this month, he's going to join us, and we've gone back to the to where we left his hero when we went into the prequels. So
I'm going to eject Murray real quick. He's chattering at me.
Oh, okay. I don't see how you could do it if you don't have a great story idea, but I am seeing a lot of authors who are interested in going back to revisit characters at some place before we actually met them for the first time.
I've also thought about writing a book that is told from Johnny's point of view. That is, that where Kate and Jim were only peripheral characters. And again, I haven't found something to hang that on yet.
Yeah, as long as you have lots of ideas, things will emerge.
Marla, what I can tell Marla is that, everything's on the table. It's just, you have to be, as a writer, you just have to be prepared for, that moment when you think, oh, wow, okay, that's it. I'm going forward on this. The difficulty is, as a writer, who has at least partially still one foot in traditional publishing, you sign contracts and you're on the hook for books. So sometimes the ideas have to wait.
All right, Patrick, back to you.
Me? Okay. Deb Gross has a nice comment. She says that my father had a Seattle to Anchorage shipping company in the 60s and 70s. We lived in Anchorage for a while. Your books take me back to the phenomenally strong people I met up north. Thank you for Kate, Liam, and all the rest.
I wonder if I would be interested. Tell Deb, I want you to go to my Facebook page, or you can write it in the columns here, and tell me if that company was Pacific Western Line. Really curious to know. And if it was, and you say so, we'll have a conversation.
I suspect she'll comment. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. A lot of people asking, where's my signed book? They've all been shipped, folks. Most of them have been shipped. I did get one from somebody who was one of the 30 people who got the extra goodies. So that's cool. Good. Yeah. LJ Roberts, who I've missed her comment, but she's a good friend of ours at the store, says she's going to be reviewing the book soon. But she also makes a good comment, which is Jack's death was genuinely and wonderfully done, as was Kate's reaction in Midnight Come Again. It's a nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then we have quite a few people weighing in on your comments about elders, and the importance of elders and bringing them to the front of the stage. Deb Gross comes back.
I'm glad they feel that way.
That's right. Deb Gross says it was. You are correct.
It was Pacific Western Lines. Okay, Deb, yes, we will be talking.
Have your people contact Dana's people.
Right.
Let's see. Oh yeah, LJ says, how about a prequel, how Kate got her scar and survived?
I thought about writing that as a short story more than anything else. And I have, but you know what? I forget which book it is. I'm sure there's going to be a maniac that shows up in the comments and says which title it is. I can't remember, but she actually relives that experience in conversation with, I forget who. I think it's over a dinner at Orso's in Anchorage. I'm not sure. And I'm not sure. That was pretty traumatic for her. And it was pretty traumatic for me being inside her head. I'm not sure I want to revisit that experience. And I'm not sure she does either.
Mhm. Let's see. Sandy asked, I think you may have answered this. When is the next Eye of Isis novel being published?
December of this year.
Okay.
Disappearance of a Scribe will be December of this year.
And when is the book launch?
We don't
Getting
have,
ahead of ourselves,
I know
Sandy.
why she's asking that. She wants to know when to buy her ticket to Scottsdale. And I want to see you all here. I do, but we don't have a date yet.
No, and we honestly don't know when we're going to be able to go back to live events. I'm certainly hoping it will be in the fall, but a lot of it's going to depend on the vaccination rollout. And I'm going to say right now that before we have crowds of people, such as Dana attracts at the Poison Pen, we are going to require a vaccination ID. So those of you who get vaccinated, everybody gets a card. And I think that in order to protect our staff, many of whom are elderly like me, speaking of elders, and other customers, I think that in order to crowd us all together, we are going to have some measure of safety. So I'm certainly hoping that when Dana's book, it's usually the first Thursday in December is normally when her publisher puts out a new book. So it'd probably be the first Saturday in December or whatever it is after Thanksgiving, but it's too early. Yeah, it's too early to tell. But just planning ahead, I would like to say that to everybody who's thinking about travel. Airlines are going to require, I think, proof of vaccination. Ticketmaster's already said it's going to require proof of vaccination. So we're not going to be a lone voice in that. But I really do think it's important that that happens.
Yes. And I underline that as well. I wholly support that. You're doing that, and I'm right there with you. Could I do like a little teeny shameless self-promotion thing? Somebody asked about if I was still writing the Alaska Traveler columns, or maybe it was just you, Patrick, who wanted to know. No, I'm not, but I've collected all 50 of those columns, plus some feature articles that I wrote for Alaska Magazine as well, into an ebook, and it's called the Alaska Traveler. So you can find it on all the usual ebook platform suspects if you want to read through them.
And at some point, we might actually get a Kate Shugak short story collection, or possibly just a Dana Stab Me Now short story collection. Sorry,
there is one, but it's not in. It's only an E. It's not in. It
yeah,
is
but it might take book form if as you add to it. I mean, for example, the Kate story that we kicked around while walking around the dog park the other day. You might be inspired to write 2 or 3 more of those, and then it might appear as a book, because often happens.
It'd be wonderful.
Yeah. Patrick, sorry, back to you.
That's okay. Amanda asks, what books are you currently reading? We know you have very Catholic tastes. All over the place.
Anything she can steal from me.
Well,
yeah, really.
Steal isn't exactly the right verb, but
you bought books in the bookstore.
In my room with 2 to 10 books in her hand, saying you need to read these, and dumps them on the bed and walks out. And yeah, so I get a little confused at time to time when I'm picking up books. I just read a terrific book that actually Barbara also edited. It's called The Silenced Women by Frederick Weissel, and Wiesel, I think, Barbara. Anyway,
W-E-I-S-E-L, yeah.
I think it was, and Barbara says that she did an interview with him. I think it was on the 2nd of February. So you can go listen to him talk about this book. Anyway, it's a terrific police procedural. And honestly, there's a great police procedural series. The new one comes out in May, written by Damian Boyd. It's the Nick Dixon series set in the Avon, Somerset in England. And it's, in my opinion, the best police procedural going now. Why compare everything to Ed McBain's 87th Precinct novels? I mean, those were the ne plus ultra police procedurals. But I got to tell you that Frederick Weisel's The Silenced Women is a really, it's an aspirant to that title. It definitely is. It's just all of the characters are fully realized, including not just one, but 4 really creepy villains. And all of the cops are multifaceted. And the witnesses, when they come in, the people who come in to, contribute to the case are fabulous. There's a bird guy that is just hysterical and who helps them solve the case, too, by the way. It's really worth reading. I just finished it. That's the one that I'm thinking of most recently.
So in answer to your question, Dana's an author, like many authors, who buys a lot of books and then she gives them to the Homer Library. She sends them to people. But I have a tendency to, as she says, run in there with advanced reading copies of books not yet published and say to her, oh, look, read this one, read that one, because I'm excited about it. And so we're kind of in different places. But Dana's really a reader. I mean, a serious reader. And we could name a lot of other authors, but I shouldn't because it violates privacy. But I've always been impressed in the 31 years that we've had the bookstore. And you have too, Patrick, aren't you? About how many authors buy a lot of books from us?
Absolutely.
If we could all figure out a way to get paid just to read books, we'd probably never write another word.
Well, we've kind of figured it out, Patrick and I, but not entirely. Unfortunately not. Anything else there, Pete, that you want to
Sally has a, wait, I just lost it. Okay, she has an interesting comment, which is, she says, I tried really hard to get into the Eye of Isis books, but the names were so different that I couldn't keep the characters straight and finally gave up. Do you have a suggestion for making this a little easier? I've had that when reading the Russian novels,
You're killing me here, Sally. I have agonized over trying to find names that come from the actual time. I have all kinds. I've bookmarked all kinds of websites all over for classical names in the Roman and the Greek and the Egyptian worlds, and trying to keep them, time specific to the time in which I am writing. I really don't have an answer for you there. I'm either you're going to get into it or not. And you know what? It's okay if you don't. There's plenty of books out there that you can read. They don't all have to be.
Can you substitute like Chuck instead of,
No.
early? No, you can't do
even
that.
if Dana wanted to, I wouldn't let her.
Patrick, I know that came from you, not from her.
I admit nothing. Jill says, did you select Liam's and Y's music yourself, or do you have assistants?
No, I selected them myself. I listen to all kinds of music, and sometimes I won't listen to music for a while, and then I will go look at the Billboard Top 100 or the Apple's, top 10 downloads for that day, or, and I'll sample all of them. And then, this is for me personally, and then I'll buy the ones that I like the samples of. And that's how I wind up with the playlists.
Well, I don't know. Let's see. Not really many more questions here. Just a lot of people making comments about how much they love your stuff, Dana. How happy they are. And a lot of people saying how happy they are that Liam's back.
Yeah. Well, it was fun. It was hard, but it was fun. I think it will be easier going forward. Now that I've relocated him, now that I've renamed, that I've got, I have the area down and all with name, named, and I've got a map that I can follow. Very important, thank God. I have Sherry Northen as she's my personal cartographer. Talk about serendipity, wonderfully. She got in touch with me to say that she and her husband were fans of the books, and we chatted, and I found out she was our cartographer, and I immediately sat up and said, really, you make maps? So now she's made maps for all of my books, well, except for the early ones.
I love having them for the park. I think that it's really helpful. I mean, it's lovely to imagine it, but I think the geography of the park is so important in the Kate Shugak books. And, I mean, not only for parts of the plot elements, but locating where the characters are in relation to each other.
Mhm.
So it's great to have. I really like maps and historicals too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
I have right now. I have a draft email to Sherry, and as I am writing "Disappearance of a Scribe," as I am adding cities around the Mediterranean and up and down the Nile, and places in Alexandria, because we have two maps. We have the classical world map, and then we have the map of Alexandria. I'm adding places to them as I write the book. So as soon as I add a new place to the book, then I go into the email and tell Sherry, okay, we need to put this house here next to the Soma, or over across here next to the Serapia. And then as soon as I finish the book, I will send her the email and she will update the map.
Okay, guys, so to summarize this, Dana is working on completing Disappearance of a Scribe, which I believe is coming to me at the end of February before she goes back to Alaska. And then she's going to write a third one. So there'll be at least a trilogy of the Eye of Isis. And then we're not sure whether Kate's going to come up next or whether Liam number 6 is going to come up next, but that's up to Dana, not up to you, not up to me. So we'll see how it goes. But what the really good news is that she's got all these things going. So you fans of Dana have a wealth of books still to come. Meantime, Spoils of the Dead, there it is. And we don't.
Speaking of maps,
Oh,
right
there
here,
it is.
right
Yeah.
here, it's Wells of the Dead. There's a map.
Excellent.
And it's worth mentioning also that the first 4 books are back out in these really attractive uniform editions that are very nice.
Yeah, they're great. And
Head of Zeus,
fun.
Nick
Whether-
Cheatham, my personal god. Yes.
Yeah, they're wonderful. It was actually a Head of Zeus author we talked to yesterday, the guy from Berlin's, Sebastian Fitzek. So I like the fact that we can get these books in US editions, because if we have to import them from England, they just cost a fortune. So it's great that we're able to get them and those of you who may think that the pricing is slightly high, trust me, it's way lower than if we had to import the books from the UK ourselves, because shipping is like $10 a book. It's just outrageous. So I'm really pleased that Head of Zeus is making, and they make beautiful books too, I might say.
We do make beautiful books.
Yeah, they really do. Really great quality.
If you can, out there in Readerland, find yourself a copy of the omnibus version of Silk and Song and take the cover off just to look at the spine, because there's a dragon on the spine that Julie at the Poison Pen found, because I didn't even know it was there.
I know, it's that's the thing. You tend, if you're the writer of the book or if you're a bookseller, you don't often dejacket a book. And so that happened to me, that a lovely signed bookmark fell out of a book that I held up because I'd read it as a manuscript. Or Luann Rice pointed out to me that the dust jacket on her beautiful book we talked to her a week ago Saturday, if you took it off, the boards of the book have this gorgeous artwork on them. And I would never have noticed it if she hadn't pointed out, because how often do you actually take the jacket off a book and look at the book itself? It's always a treat, though, when you do and find something wonderful. Dana, this has been, as always, a real pleasure to talk to you. I want to thank the Dana Maniacs and everyone else who has taken time today to listen to us. We will have a podcast available for this conversation tomorrow. So if you recommend that to friends who might not want to sit in front of their computer. And Patrick, at some point we'll get it in. You've had a customer point out that you can watch the YouTube videos on smart TV.
Yeah, I can do that. I can do that right now. Once we get it.
Right.
Well, maybe not right now, but today, a little bit later, I'll get it up.
Right. But that's another way that we have a very large library of author interviews available on YouTube, and you can in fact put them on your smart TV so you don't have to sit in front of your computer. So there are lots of different ways to experience these conversations, and it's nice that we get people from all over to participate. So we thank you for joining us. So Patrick, thanks for taking time on Saturday on your quote day off to do this. And Dana,
problem.
let's merge, you from the library, me from my office, and we'll have a celebratory drink here in a minute.
We're getting out the Delheim.
Yeah, this is the official launch of Spoils of the Dead. So I want to thank all of you who've partied with us. Yep, it's been great. So bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.